This PSA was brought to you by the Peter G Show.
You may have second thoughts after the show.
But don't drink the faucet.
We're really talented. We should get Oscars.
Just pick out a car, for Christ's sake.
No, my name is Peter.
Yeah, I want.
Here's good.
Yeah.
Madam Perry.
I need to get back in the genie bottle.
Louis from Pennsylvania, you're on. He likes it. It's showtime.
Peter G Show, Peter G Show, divorced dad, single dad, divorced dad, single dad, Peter G Show.
Oh yeah, Wednesday, right here. The day you've been waiting for. Right here, Life with Peter G, the Peter G Show, live every Wednesday like clockwork, 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. on the East Coast, and definitely God willing, because as we've proven in the past few weeks, sometimes shit happens. But we went off without a hitch last week, and I am finally pleased to announce that after several attempts of getting veteran journalist Steve Rosen on this show with his book. Where's his book? Right here. Let me get this. Tonechaser. Shiny. I'm trying not to let it glare. Come on, all lighting system. Tonechaser. Right here. It's a beautiful book. He spent the first 26 years with Edward, and this is his book, Understanding Edward. His 26-year journey with Edward Van Halen. Not to mention, he has interviewed the greatest guitar players on this planet, and then some. So it's going to be a real interesting evening tonight. So, buckle up, get your popcorn, hurry up and take a break, go to the bathroom, bring a porta potty next to you, whatever you need. And look, it's already starting. Hey, Paul, look. Speaking of comments, real quick, because Steve's going to be coming up in a few minutes. Last week, I had freethinker Matt Kim on the show, right? And he's a younger guy, and I like the way he says things. I've said it before, he has a different inflection than mine. He has a way of saying maybe the same thing I will say, but he could say it in a much calmer fashion and make it sound a whole lot better. I mean, he's got that gift. I'm different. We're not alike, but he's built quite a following for himself. And I like talking to him. And I invited him back on the show. He was on about a year and a half ago. And I invited him on the show last week. And he came on graciously. And I said, we're just going to talk about whatever I want to throw at you, from, present to past to real life to baloney, you name it. And promises made, promises kept. I threw everything at him to where he even says, we're kind of going off the rails. I didn't think so. I thought it's controlled chaos, the way I like to put it. But the one thing I got to give him credit for, because this, when my guests have an option of sharing the show live on their platforms, so he decided he was cool enough to share this show, the Peter G Show, Life of Peter G, with him on it, live on his YouTube platform simultaneously. It was like a simulcast. And he said, I'll do the live for you. He said, I'm sure my platform people are going to make me take it down after that, but we'll go the live, and whoever catches it live will get to catch it live. And his people really made the attendance and came on. And not only did they come on, they participated. They were really commenting the whole show, all night long. Look at this. Pensacola in the house. Good. I hope it's nice over there. Come on in. The water's warm. His people were commenting. I mean, had I known we were going to get so many of his side commenting, I mean, there was I lost count. And unfortunately, I couldn't see them afterwards because they took the show down, which I wish they would have kept it. But again, I was thankful enough that he let it run on his platform. But there was hundreds, maybe over 1,000. They were rolling so quick, I could not keep up with them. And a lot of them were good. A lot of them were commenting to whatever we were talking about. And there was always that handful of the nut kickers. I mean, somebody who had to come down on me because, number one, they don't know me. Who is this guy? Number two, I'm pretty sure that Matt Kim has a younger crowd, so I'm old guy to them right off the bat. Don't cut me no slack. Just come on in and start kicking the guy that we never saw before, who is on, that Matt is on his show, but we love Matt and we're going to, break some balls, which was fine. I'm cool with that. I really am. I told you, I can take it. I totally get it, because I remember when I was 20, I'm looking at a 30-year-old as a musician, when I was a 20-year-old musician, especially. I'm looking at a 30-year-old musician. I'm going, yeah, but he's 30. Like there was some big deal. Like I was like a, world of difference. I mean, and now looking at it is like, yeah, I was a friggin' young kid and I was an idiot. I was a great musician when I was young, but I refined and everything as I got older and made it that much better. And I'm going, if this guy was good, he's good. Yeah, but he's 30. Like I'm an idiot. So I totally get the whole millennial thing. And, they really kicked me in the ass a few times. And that's, like I said, it was good. But the point being that his fan base stayed on. That show was over almost 3 hours. And they participated, whether they loved me or hated me, they participated the whole way through. Now, I know that we have a crowd that is, maybe it's my fault. I have raised a crowd who I'm fondly and lovingly have always called my lurkers. You love to watch, but not a whole lot participate. Even when I used to open up phone lines back in the early days, I got way more phone calls than I do now because I veered away from it for so long, and I guess you've forgotten. But anyway, just making that point on what a crowd he brought in that participated. For those of you who may have seen the show last week, it was interesting. It was a whole different thing. Tonight is going to be totally different again, but I urge you, please, please, please. The key here is I also speak every week about how badly YouTube treats me. I mean, they just don't like a lot of times some of the things I talk about, and they don't let me get out there. Their algorithms, I do a good show, but how can you love me or hate me if you don't know that I exist? So please, I'm asking those of you who are getting familiar with me, who are fond of me, who like what I have to do and say, please subscribe to YouTube. It's free. I get a lot of people on Facebook. I love Facebook. Go to the official Peter G Show Facebook page. Hit the like button, the follow, whatever the heck it is. We have a great following. I'm surprised at Facebook. I thought they were going to give me more hell than YouTube, but we have way better and easier time on Facebook. But I want to keep building the YouTube, okay? The only way I can keep bringing you great entertainment, and I do mean great, doesn't get any better than this, I mean it, is if we can show them that, hey, we want this guy, okay? It's that simple. Don't forget, I know a lot of you are busy. That's why I gave so much credit to Matt's crowd too, because they followed all that time. But for those of you who can't, put earbuds in your ears while you're driving, while you're commuting home from work, depending on what time you're at. Just a little after 6 in the West Coast, a little after 8 in Central, and after 9 on the East Coast, okay? So wherever you may be working night shift, right, Paul? Put some earbuds in your ear, Google Peter G Show podcast, take the audio version with you. It's the next best thing to seeing the video version. You can take it with you. We got over 400 shows now. I mean, and you can pick the shows. You can listen to them over again. I do. Sometimes I really want to refresh what I'm listening to, and I get more out of it. So do that. You got the audio podcast and you got the video podcast that after the show is over live, you can see it on demand. And then it gets uploaded to many more platforms too. Rumble, BitChute, Odyssey, and then all the shorts go to your Instagram. Instagram's another one. I can't get arrested on Instagram. Please follow me on Instagram. All the shorts are on there and on TikTok. I have a lot of decent followers on TikTok, but TikTok breaks my balls too. They really love to, they scold everybody, but I see a lot of people doing way worse than me, and not way worse, but saying the same things as me, if not, more, and they're fine. But again, can't fight City Hall. They own the platform. That's just the way it is. So we have to show them by following that, hey, we like this guy, okay? And you need to let him speak his piece. Hurt no one. I'm just trying to inform, possibly educate. It's entertainment with a purpose. That's all it is. Pretty simple stuff. But that's basically that. I just wanted to reiterate on last week's show because I was pleasantly surprised. And I was, just take notes. Follow. Come on, man. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to bring Rosen on the show in just a minute. But first, we need to hear from my good friends from Clean Start Products with their money-saving fuel additive DX1 driver. All right? So don't go nowhere. We'll be right back.
Hello, it's Tyrone Thompson here with Clean Star Products, and we're here with William.
High-end car service.
And we've just serviced his Cadillac Escalade 2024. And we're going to be giving it a go to see what kind of results he'll be getting in his fuel mileage and any performance differences, and be checking with him later.
All right.
Thank you, William, for participating in our environmental program. We're here with High-End Car Services, my friend William, who's been using DX1 for a small time now. What kind of results have you been getting?
Up to 45.1 miles per gallon best results, and the engine has been quieter, and I can definitely feel the power in the engine. I have a diesel.
Thank you so much. We're going to keep going with the program and check in with you later. We appreciate you. The Long Life Engine program with DX1 Driver is the only safe environmental product for your high mileage engine. DX1 is a non-toxic, clean-burning oil that goes into your fuel and your engine oil, providing lubricity for gasoline and diesel engines. You save on average 10% gasoline and 15% diesel fuel consumption. Call now for a price quote and place your order today. It's the Long Life Engine program from Clean Star Products and Tyrone Thompson.
That's right, Clean Start Products with their money-saving fuel additive DX1 driver. I have 2 words for you. Same 2 words I say every week because it's true. It works. And makes a great peace sign, too. It does work. I wouldn't have believed it. Tried it myself. It works. If you drive a high-mileage vehicle or you want to protect your vehicles, more importantly, because let's face it, folks, cars are expensive, I strongly suggest you look into checking out Ty's product, DX1 Driver, because it's simple to use. It's real simple. Take one of these little bottles, or they have different packaging, a bunch of different packaging, but this little bitty bottle right here basically takes care of a 4-door sedan, okay? If you have a 8-cylinder SUV or pickups and things like that, it'll be a little bit bigger of a bottle. You pour one of these in a fresh oil change into the crankcase. That couldn't be any simpler. Stays the whole oil change, whether it's 5,000 miles or 10, depending on what kind of vehicle you drive. Then every time you fill up your tank, pour one of these bottles into the tank and then fill up your car or truck or whatever with gas and just drive. You notice the difference within 3 or 4 tanks of the DX1 driver. I did. Started noticing it immediately. After that, I started getting a better power response. The fuel mileage I didn't have to step on it as much. I drive a V8 and it does drink a lot of gas, and it definitely made a difference. But don't believe me. I want you to call Ty, speak to him and or whoever answers the phone and ask any questions. I mean, you can't be any easier. Go to www.cleanstarproducts and there's a website there, and you can check out all their products and or call them directly. There's the phone right there, 310-200-8931. They'll answer all your questions. They have a product that works, and they're proud of it. And after you speak to them, should you decide you want to order, here's the important part. You need to mention that you saw it on the Peter G Show. You do. Why? Good question. Because if you mention that you saw it on the Peter G Show, they will send you 5 bottles for the price of 4. Okay? 5 bottles for the price of 4, and a deal's a deal. And that's the perfect starter kit, actually, because 5 bottles, we'll put one in the crankcase for that new oil change. Put it in there. And then that'll give you 4 full tanks of fuel with the product. And you'll notice the difference, I promise. So call that number, ask all the questions you may or may not have. And if you decide to order, make sure you mention it that you saw it on the Peter G Show. That's super important because that'll get you 5 bottles for the price of 4. You know, a deal's a deal, all right? Remember, they know what I do, and they still sponsor me anyway. So God bless them. All right. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that tonight I have veteran rock journalist Steverosen that's coming on the show in a matter of seconds. But first, we cannot start the show without taking a little sippy poo right here on the old Good Luck cup. So you're going to see and hear a great show tonight. I promise you. Sometimes 3 times is a charm, and we are definitely going to be rocking tonight. So cheers. I love you guys. Thanks for watching. Oh, smooth. Okay, let me get my bearings here and see what we got going on here. See, even Paul knows. Smooth. That's right. That's right. Smooth it is. All right. I'm about to bring on Steve Rosen. He created an amazing hardcover book. I mean, this book is beautiful. I'm going to tell him in a minute, but not only is it a great read, it's just a beautiful book. I mean, it's 3-dimensional. It has a feel to it. When it got shipped to me, even the box that it came in you knew it was a custom box. So there's a lot of pride and a lot of years that went into this. So I can only tell you, and after listening to his audio version of all this, which we'll get into, I can tell you that the reason there's a lot of pride and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that went into this is because the man lived a lot of blood, sweat, and tears with this guy right here, Edward Van Halen. And it's definitely a book that comes from the soul. So, where are we? Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, from the western part of the United States, rock veteran journalist, Mr. Steverosen. Hey, we made it.
We made it, buddy. Here we are.
I'm telling you, 3 times is a charm. First, I want to thank you for your patience. We had some issues beyond mine and most people's control that I was driving me crazy, as you know, but got hammered out. And again, God willing, tonight's going to be smooth as silk, and we're going to deliver the people what they want. So thank you for hanging in there and allowing me to help you transvey this message, so to speak, to the world. So first, tell everybody a little bit about yourself, and then I'm going to get into why I'm so pleased about what I've been able to encounter.
Okay, capsule. Here's a capsule explanation. I was always an avid reader. I loved to write. Even in junior high, I was like writing papers. I loved doing that. I wrote for my high school newspaper. In 12th grade, I had a music column, Culver City Centurion. I graduated high school. I go to UCLA for a year, wanting to take some English classes and, polish my writing skills. And that was a nightmare. That was a horrible experience. I basically left at the end of that first year. This English teacher was horrible. He pulled me aside. He goes, you really think you're a better writer than you are? You'll never make it as a journalist. You'll never make it as a writer. Okay, fuck you. That's why you're in there teaching, and I'm here talking to Peter G about my Van Halen book. But we won't go there, right? Fast forward a couple more years. I began sending out little articles, reviews mainly, because I didn't have access to interview anybody. Nobody knew me. So I thought, well, I could go to a show and write live reviews. Wrote some live reviews, had those published in a couple of very small, not very good local publications. One was called the LA Star. I went to England with my buddy, and we actually did like the Jack Kerouac thing. We hitchhiked around Europe. I met some people over in England, got some names, came back here, met some people at a company called Gibson and Stromberg. They were like the first rock and roll publicity company. And I mean, they handled the Stones, Steely Dan, Jeff Beck, Captain Hook, Dr. Hook, sorry. Remember the cover of Rolling Stone? They handled a bunch of bands. They took me under their wing. They liked this little Steve Rosen kid. They embraced me. They opened a lot of doors for me. I started writing for Guitar Player magazine, wrote for them from 73 to 79, did a bunch of incredible interviews, Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page, Frank Zappa, John Entwistle, David Gilmour, Robin Trower, Ronnie Wood. And from there it becomes like a stepping stone. Hey, I've done this work for Guitar Player. Can I do some writing for you? Are you looking for some freelancers? So I began writing for magazines like Cream and Circus, Musician, Zoo World. In '84, I began writing for Guitar World, which is where I wrote all of those Van Halen stories. I started writing for Asian magazines, Japan, wrote for some magazines in China, Canada, Mexico, a lot of European magazines, Italy, France, Germany. And it just kind of grows, you know, and you just keep pounding on doors. And, 50 years later, that's the only gig I ever had. I never had to take another gig. I was always working. I was always doing something. Along the way, I had written 8 books, including this 8th book, Tonechaser, about life with Edward Van Halen. And it's been a remarkable ride. I mean, I was so lucky to have been there at a time when rock and roll magazines were really just being born, and they needed outside writers. And I was there, you know. I've said it over and over. I would have done what I did for free, you know. More so, I would have paid them. You're going to print my story. You're going to put my name in print. You're going to give me tickets to the concert and send me albums and send me T-shirts and rock and roll swag and let me hang out. You know, where do I sign? You know, so it's been remarkable.
You came in during the time when the upcoming of the greatest of the greats. I mean, you interviewed Jimi Hendrix?
I never interviewed Hendrix. He passed away kind of right before I began writing. But I interviewed everybody else.
Where did I see that? Okay.
I interviewed Noel Redding, the bass player from Jimi Hendrix.
Jimmy Page, Johnny Winter, Frank Zappa. I mean, the list is unbelievable. But again, I guess my point being is you came around like when music was thriving. I mean, it was just, if you had talent, you became famous, and you were there to document all of it. I mean, the 70s and the 80s and, you know, and the late 60s and things like that. Who would have known?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if you think about the 70s, the early 70s, all those bands that would go on to become legendary, they were just coming out with their first albums then, or their second albums. So I interviewed all the members of Aerosmith after watching them perform the night before at the Whiskey, which held 200 people. Their second record was just coming out. Their first record was like, this new band Aerosmith. They had Dream On, which made a little bit of an impact. But other than that, nobody knew who Aerosmith was. The publicists were basically like, oh my God, would you please interview Aerosmith? I mean, that's really how it was. So ZZ Top, I met ZZ Top when their second record or third record was coming out. They'd come out with LaGrange, and they were starting their ascent, but they were nowhere where they were going to be. So all these bands were just beginning. So that's why it was such an amazing time. Publicists needed writers needed publicists. Management needed copy on their artists, and so they would reach out to writers. It was really a community. I mean, it truly was. Everybody really had everybody else's back, and it was a remarkable period. It was amazing.
Print was the gateway to the only way of knowing what's going on. I mean, there was no internet, and I screwed up. It was you photographed Jimi Hendrix in 1968 at the Forum.
I did. I actually, I mean, I was never a photographer, but back in the day, you could bring cameras into concerts. No one cared, you know. It's not like today where you bring your iPhone in and there's, you know, those pictures are now on 1,000 different sites. So yes, I saw Jimmy. I think it was '69, and I had my little camera, and I took these pictures. And you know, not knowing what I was doing, I mean, at all. And yes, I posted those on my Facebook pages, and the response has been amazing because pictures from that time, there's not a lot of that stuff, and particularly from sort of novice photographers. So yes, I did interview. I did shoot the Jimi Hendrix experience at the Forum.
I knew I had again, but you might as well have interviewed him. You've interviewed everybody else from that era, you know, and that's what's so fascinating about it. I mean, again, in '68 or '69, I'm a couple of years younger than you, but you don't know how much I wish. Like everybody, when I moved to LA, that is successful, is about 10 years older than me. You know, they're getting up there because they came into LA at a time when it was thriving. It just was, you know, if you hooked in with the right people, you just went from one point to another point and you just kept going, you know, if you had the talent. And, you know, there's a lot of people nowadays that have talent, but, you know, I know guys nowadays that have hit songs, that young guys that they're living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Hollywood. There's no, you know, it's just not the same.
Right. And you brought up earlier, Peter, a really salient point about print being the gateway to everything. It was, right? So you if you were a guitar player, you waited with bated breath for that next issue of Guitar Player magazine to come out. I have guys writing me, you know, oh my God, I never knew that Jimmy Page used a Supro on that first album, or you know, and in the moment, at the time when I'm doing those interviews, I mean, I'm trying to do my gig and talk to them about guitars and amps, but you never think that 30 years later or 40 years later, you know, those people who read those stories when that was the only information available on Mick Ronson or Robin Trower, that they would be writing all these years later saying, oh my God, I read your interviews, you know, and it was so great because I never knew about this stuff. So yes, you know, magazines were king. Print was king. And fast forward to your other point, yes, if you're a journalist now or a musician, yes, what has the internet done? Well, it's made it available to everybody who picks up a guitar or can sing a song, the ability to record their music. And that's a good thing. The bad thing is there are now 10,000 people doing that. And what happens? You have to wade through all of that. Like you say, you've got buddies who are, I'm sure, amazing guitar players and artists. I have guys who are the most incredible guitar players you've ever heard. And I doubt if they make $50 a year. You know, they have their own websites, but there's no mechanism behind that. Yes, back in the day, you had record labels. And you can bemoan record labels that you were signed to deals and, oh, you signed yourself away. Well, maybe. But again, if you were talented and successful, all of that came back to you because a label would put you on the road. A label would help you get your merch out there. They would get you on the radio. Now you tour, you and your buddies pile into a van and travel up and down, you know, your regional area, and that's it. And hope you can get a club to pay $100 a night for a guy and you know, the bar.
Yeah.
So
it's sad but true. Again, there's an upside and a downside. I used to enter as a drummer. I used to wait for Modern Drummer magazine. Even while I was on the road, that magazine would go on the road with me. I'd take it because that was the only way, unless you were watching as I was a child, Don Kirshner's rock concert or something, or Saturday, what was it called? Saturday night something. There was not, that was it. You didn't have a whole lot to go on. And I'm seeing a lot of these guys that came up from that era. You know, it's funny because Steve Picaro, who was a keyboard player from Toto, you know, I didn't know that his start, because before I started getting in with the Toto camp, Steve was already out. So I'd only see him occasionally, but when he came on the show and we talked about a lot of stuff, and then we hung out a lot more personally, and he got his start playing with Our Love Is he just died, Gary Wright, the keyboard player, the synth keyboard player. He left high school at 17 to tour with Gary Wright. So, I mean, it was just a different world. But now you can't get arrested. So, you know, but you've been around. You are you are a journalistic icon in a lot of ways. I mean, you know, whether it's that, you know, some people would say that in a quarter will buy you a cup of coffee. But the bottom line is you've got history, my friend, a lot of it. And I know we're talking about everything in general right now. We're going to get into the whole Van Halen stuff, but I just want the people to know who exactly I have sitting right here, you know, calmly talking to, because you've forgotten probably more stuff than you can remember that you've written.
That's probably true.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. You know, I loved what I was doing. You know, I worked really hard at it. I worked really hard at becoming a better writer and a better journalist. You know, and on the other side, I was lucky to have met all of those people. And, you know, people sort of look back, you know, at that body of work. And, you know, probably the last year, 2 years, you know, I've been putting stuff up on my Facebook page. I've never been a social media person. I don't understand it. It's confusing to me. I have somebody who helps me with Instagram, and I have a buddy who helps me with my YouTube page. But, you know, I do have this body of work, and I thought, well, you know, maybe other people would really like to share in those experiences I had. And that's what I've tried to do on Facebook. You know, I put up photos of me, and you can see some of them behind me here, of the people I've interviewed, and I'll talk about it and try to describe what went on and what that person was like. And on my YouTube page, I've put up interviews, a lot of very cool interviews that I did back in the day. So it's, I mean, it's rewarding. I mean, it feels amazing. You know, for me, respect is like way up there on the list of important things in life. And if you have respect from other people, then you know, I think you've served your time well on this earth. You know, because it's hard to earn anybody's respect. So I think people respect what I've done and that body of work. And I'm grateful, man. I'm grateful to be on your show and talking about my career and the book and all that stuff, you know. So
we're going to get into it. But here's, speaking of respect, Paul said, would love to have a collection of all Steve Rosen's articles. He's a friggin' historian. True.
Well, that's really very generous, Paul. You know, I was going to say what I've been doing. I probably only have, I'll bet you it's not even 20% of all the stories I've done. Along the way, you know, magazines, and it makes me crazy to think about it, get tossed out, or, oh, I don't think I need that. I mean, I've got a lot of stuff. I probably got several hundred magazines. But I was doing stuff for like these Italian and French magazines, I mean, like monthly, I mean, for years. And I only kept a few of them. It's like, I can't read the story. You know, I can see my name in English. You know, I should have kept all that stuff. But in sort of response to what you said, Paul, I've actually been going through and looking for stuff I don't have. Like, I have most of the guitar player issues, but there's still issues that I'm missing. So I can go online and I can find those. There was some issues of Circus, and now you're going back to like 73 and 74, and there's not many of these issues available. And finding some of those. There was one called International Musician Recording World. I wrote for them for years, and in any issue, I probably wrote 3 or 4 articles, you know. So I've been trying to kind of fill in those holes, you know. I'm the kind of person where if I have one album by an artist, and even if I hate that artist, I have to have all the other albums by that artist. So I did an album on Warner's by somebody, and I hate to say this, I was never a Bonnie Raitt fan. I just never liked her stuff. But she would release an album a year, so I had like all these Bonnie Raitt records that I never listened to. Later, I went back and realized, oh my God, what a moron you were! What an amazing artist she was. But that's the kind of person I was, you know.
Oh, you didn't like Bonnie?
Didn't like Bonnie. And what makes me even crazier, I could have interviewed Bonnie Raitt 10 times. Do you want to interview Bonnie? We got a Bonnie in town. You want to? No, I don't want to interview Bonnie Raitt. Grateful Dead. I was never a Dead fan. Yeah. I could have interviewed Jerry Garcia, I swear to God, 20 times. And you know, and it's funny because even if sometimes if I didn't care about an artist, I would still talk to them because all of these artists, I mean, they're incredibly intriguing in their own right, you know. So why I didn't do that, I don't know, man. The snob in me. There was a few mistakes I made. Real quick anecdote. I'm in England. I told you I went to England with my buddy. We were hitching around. I met the publicist who was then handling, believe it or not, Paul McCartney, who was doing Wings, early days of Wings, and he was handling this new band called Queen. And he said, "Hey, I've got this band called Queen. I have a test pressing, a white label. Those early, before the final record would come out, they made like what were called white labels, and it was literally a white label and might have said Queen on it, and that was it. I have a white label pressing of this band Queen. All 4 members are going to be here at my office tomorrow. Do you want to interview them?" So I'm thinking, Queen, that's kind of like glam. You know, I'm not into that glam kind of thing. No, I'll pass Tony. Tony Brainsby was a publicist. And then I find out, I get the record, you know, I'm back home a couple months later, Queen, the first record, I go, oh my God, what did I do? So I try not to make that mistake too often. So
hindsight is 20/20. I mean, you know, the Jerry Garcia, you know, that's an eclectic crowd. I've never been a Deadhead either, but there's tons of people who just, you know, go gaga over that. Yeah. Bonnie Raitt, I don't know. I've loved her. She's very gracious and she's maintained, and you know, I just thought she's one of the coolest chicks out there you know, and she's still going. And I don't know. I've always kind of been fond of her. I mean, for what she does. I mean, I don't, you know, it's completely different than what we're going to talk about with Van Halen stuff and all that, but she's still very relevant. But again, there's a million players out there and there's a lot of good ones, and you know, you win some, you lose some. One thing I did want to mention on the way you're saying about you threw out a lot of your stuff and didn't take, as I'm reading the book and especially as I'm listening to the audiobook, there was a lot of moments where it's like, why didn't I do this, or why didn't I hold on to that, or how come I never got that number, or this and that. We've all had those. I mean, every time you said that, I'm thinking about myself, because the same thing, because even with Eddie, I have one photo of Eddie that I took and I'm not in it. I took the picture of him holding, you know, and because at the time it's like, you just keep thinking, well, we'll do it the next time. It just lives on forever. And sometimes forever stops, as we well know. And so it is what it is. All right. I do want to talk about, start on the book. First of all, I know I mentioned this a bunch of times. I'm going to mention it again. This is a beautiful book. I mean, the design, the feel, and even the box that it came in. Did you put it together, or you had somebody put it together? I mean, you know,
I did. Hold on 1 second, Peter.
All right, I'll be here. I'm here all night.
I'm sorry, man.
Oh, okay.
You didn't have the box.
I thought you had to go to the bathroom or something.
So, yeah, no. So, I'm so happy you pointed that out. So I sit down in 2020, and it's August 24th, and I remember that day because that was my birthday. And I sit down to write this book. I'm sorry. Let me backtrack just a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's go back to 1986. I've been friends with Edward for about 9 years at that point. They've just come out with the 1984 record. Sammy Hagar has just joined the band, and I believe this is before 5150 has come out. Van Halen is one of the biggest bands in the world, and Edward is arguably the most influential, most popular guitar player on the planet, right? So the journalist in me is thinking, you know, writers are going to come to Edward, and they're going to want to write the story of his life. And I say to myself, I want to be that person. So literally after months of building up courage to ask him that question, I'm driving over to his house and I'm saying to myself, today is the day. And I go into 5150, his studio, and I say, Edward, look, man, I know that a lot of writers are going to want to write the story of your life. I would like to be the person that writes it. And I'm thinking he's going to take some time, and he'll go, yeah, let me think about it, you know, or whatever, you know. And he takes a couple puffs on his cigarette, which he always had in his hand, and he goes, yeah, man, it has to be you. You couldn't be anybody else, you know. And for him to say that to me was, you know, I talk about respect. I mean, that was a pretty surreal moment. That book never happened. So let's fast forward from the last time I see Edward in 2003. Let's fast forward 17 years to 2020. So I've been thinking about that book that never was. I think to myself, maybe now is the time to go back to that. So I start writing. 14 months later, in 2021, I finished the book. The first edition gets printed in 2022. And I tell you all of that as sort of a backstory about the actual look of the book. As I'm writing the book, I had two thoughts in my mind. One, as a writer, I wanted to write a book that was sort of on the same literary level as Edward was on a musical level. In other words, I wanted the book to read like one long, perfectly executed guitar solo. I didn't want any lapses. I didn't want it to be boring in a place. And I worked really, really hard on it. You know, I'd write something, I'd come back the next day and read it and go, my God, that is just garbage. And I toss it out. And I mean, it happened a lot. So at the end of 14 months, it's finished, and I think what I've done is really good. It was certainly the best book that I could have written. Now I'm thinking, oh my God, the book has to look perfect. It can't look like, because I ultimately decided to self-publish after a couple of publishers were not interested in the book, which blew my mind. It's like, how can you not be interested in a book by an author who is friends with Edward Van Halen for 26 years, and no other writer has that story? But that's another story for another time. So I thought, okay, I'm going to self-publish. The last thing I wanted, and no offense to anybody who has had books self-published, but there's always a feel and a look about a self-published book because they tend to be printed on less expensive paper, and the printing isn't as carefully done, and covers aren't as carefully executed. I spent a lot of time searching out a printer, and I actually finally found one in China. These guys were remarkable. Their attention to detail, and it had that embossed thing that you were talking about, so the raised lettering. And if you hold it in a certain light, it's called, that effect where it appears glossy, ultra. I'm sorry, there's a certain effect that outlines Edward when you turn it in the light. Right. You see that same thing on albums.
Yeah, he's shiny and the book is flat. I mean, exactly. or satin.
Exactly, and there's a word for that, and it escapes my demented mind. You know, but the quality of the paper and the printing, and the font, you know, and the spacing between the lines, because it is a thick book. I mean, it's 580 pages. You know, it's over 250,000 words, and that's about twice as long as music bios. You know, I paid attention to every detail. The photo is from my very good friend Niels Lozauer, who is Van Halen's official photographer. I painstakingly looked through photos to pick the perfect photo. The binding, as you said, is amazing. And if you hold that book on end, you see there's like a little thing up there. It's like colored, and there's actually a description for that. You know, has special colors. You know, and the inside of the book has the yellow and black, and I wanted the colors to match. I spent a lot of time making sure that the book was perfect, you know. And as you mentioned, this is a custom book box that I had made for this third edition. There were no boxes for the first and second editions. So I really, I wanted everything to be perfect. You know, it was important to me.
I'm missing the one thing when I got, and I was very surprised. Again, it came in a beautiful box, and then when I opened it up, I go, I get a lot of books, okay, through the you know, but by far, and this is no disrespect to other people's books, but I got to say this is probably my top book when it comes to I was wowed. You know what? A lot of times I don't get hardcover books because people say, hey, we're sending it to the interviewer. You know, you want the book, but I keep these things. You know, the only thing I don't have is I wish you would have signed it for me. But you'll just have to do that when I see you, okay?
Absolutely. Well, this is before we really even knew each other. I mean, I just kind of knew you from a distance, and you know.
I get it. You know, I go, this is a great book and then I, you know, really started learning more about you, and I'm going, damn man, he's got to sign this book because this is a book that I'm going to keep forever. Obviously, I mean, I'm going to tell you because and maybe there was a reason behind all this delay in us getting together, but I had the opportunity because I take several long walks a week, several hours a day, 3, 4 to 5 days a week. I was fortunate enough because of the delays we have to listen to the audio version of this book that you sent me. And I don't know how many hours that is, but I'm going to guess 30 to 40 hours. You must know.
I'm sorry, Peter. I think that first one is, like
the second. The second of the actual book, not the first one, the second one. The first one is all of just a lot of the tapes being played. The second one is you're reading the story with the audio tapes.
Right. I think it's like 21 or 22 hours long.
It's got to be longer than that because my walks and I was counting how many days I was listening to it from the time I stepped out of my vehicle to the time I got back into it. But if you ever run out of work, I'll tell you one thing you could do. You could always go in and write for what do they call that? Oh shit! I was thinking about it as a joke because you're very passionate when you were reading this stuff and erotica. Because you were very descriptive. You know, I mean, descriptive, and I think the funniest thing about you was you would lie a lot and then say, I didn't really do that. I just wish I had, or something like that. You know, there was a lot of that going on. But I think the reason you just mentioned about the book that Eddie said, yes, you can write the book because you knew that a lot of other writers would want to write the book, but you failed to mention yet that there's a reason why he let you write the book. You guys started out with a lot of hanging out and history of personal, you know, just hanging out, not just interviewer, you know, and yeah, sure, you're the interviewer. I choose to write my book.
Right, exactly. So those prior, again, it was probably about 9 years that we were hanging out. Yes, there was a lot of, you know, interviewee. I was writing stories on Edward, and so we would sit down for more formalized types of interviews, and we would talk about guitars and amps and that type of thing. But a lot of times, we would just hang out. We lived about 9 minutes apart from each other. So I lived in the Hollywood Hills in an area called Laurel Canyon. Edward lived sort of a little west of me in an area called Coldwater Canyon. So I lived in Laurel Canyon was kind of the bohemian, kind of funky part of Laurel Canyon, Hollywood Hills, you know. The cheaper rentals, and Coldwater was the more expensive domiciles. But basically, we were just, there's a street called Mulholland, which is kind of a famous street, that kind of a windy street. You've seen it in a lot of movies. We were just a Mulholland drive away from each other. So he would literally do the, you know, Jerry Seinfeld popover, you know, pop in. He would just, you know, come by, and he'd just want to come by and hang, and he'd come in the house and he'd be smoking his cigarette, which made me insane because I hated cigarette smoking, and the house would reek of cigarettes. And I never told him, no, Edward, you can't smoke in my house. You know, never had the balls to tell him he couldn't smoke in the house, So I give him an ashtray, and then he'd go and pick up one of the guitars that I had. I was a guitar player. I always had a couple of guitars sitting in racks, in stands, in this front room. And he'd go and he'd pick up a guitar and he'd start noodling, and we just hang out and we talk, And in all honesty, we would get high. We would get high a lot, and do what were then back in the day kind of drugs that everybody was doing, and
That's the norm.
Cocaine, lest anybody think we were shooting heroin or doing something really bad, And I got to tell you, man, and I don't condone this for anybody, and I hope anybody who did them doesn't do them anymore, but it was a fuck of a lot of fun. I mean, I'm sitting there with Edward Van Halen, and he's noodling on guitar, and you're, you have that feeling, so it was pretty close. And a lot of conversations, even when we weren't on drugs, were very personal. And when I was going to write the book on him, he said, listen, you can record me anytime you want. I don't care, whatever the conversation, whatever. So from that point, I would record a lot of our conversations. And in the book, I called them the Twilight tapes, because typically they would happen late at night. He was up in the studio and he wanted to talk, so he'd call me at 3 a.m, and the phone would ring, and I knew who it was. It was either Edward or some emergency, because who else is going to call you at 3 a.m, right?
Right.
And I go, hi, Steve, Edward, and he'd always say, hi, Steve, it's Edward, as if by then I didn't recognize his voice. And he'd just want to talk, and he'd talk about his family, or he'd talk about the band. And a lot of times there was personal stuff, and all that stuff went into the book. It was a very close relationship. I really believe that. And I don't say that to be like, being over the top, or to, pump myself up. I'm not that person, but it was a really close relationship, and that respect was mutual. And of course I had respect for him as a musician. I mean, how could you not? And that was always a conundrum, trying to find that line between being Steve Rosen journalist and being Steve Rosen friend, and interviewing him for a magazine and being both Steve Rosen journalist and Steve Rosen friend, and not trying to geek out over him while I'm trying to really do a job, and not trying to lose myself in a thought saying, oh my God, man, you're talking to Edward Van Halen. This guy is changing the landscape of guitar. And that never escaped my mind. Even when I was, just hanging out with him for a friend, I was always keenly aware of that. But I tried to pull back from that and not be that kind of overbearing, geeky, psychopath kind of a person. So the relationship was built on respect. And yes, it was those intervening years that gave him the confidence to say, yes, you can write that book. Because asking to write a book on your life, that's a big ask, right? And I don't think he gave his permission lightly. And no, I don't think he would have said yes to any other writer who had approached him. So
I think in the early days, because I remember you when you first met him, was that the Upstairs in the Whiskey?
Correct.
Okay, I think you got plain lucky in the beginning to meet him to where you crossed paths again, and he was not that big, and so he hung out a little bit, but you built trust with him, because I know that as he got bigger, everybody's tugging on him. He's popping out. I mean, you talk in the book about him coming to your house in a shitbox car. They've already done their first tour. They're still living at mom and dad's house, and they've already done their first major tour after the first record, correct?
Correct. That's
okay.
Exactly right.
So, but I mean, who knew that? Because again, in the fans' perspective, they come out, they're rock stars already. Nobody knows the humbling early moments. But again, from what I can take from what little time I've had with you, you seem like a gentle guy. Like you're not a prick. You know what I mean? And that's a good thing, because people like him sometimes want to go to somebody who's not a threat to them. You know what I mean? Looking for something. And you built that trust. And that's how, later on, I mean, the late nights, even when he's super, super big, before things started changing, and we'll talk about how change happens as well, but he spent a lot of time because you were kind of like his escape, the way I see it. Now, I don't, but he's been hanging out nice and quiet, talking to you, fucking around on guitars, telling life stuff, and before he has to go back to the other side of his life.
That is very kind for you to say that. Look, for me to say that about myself, again, it sounds like an ego thing. I am not that person. I was always that person. I was never the threat person. I honestly thought I would have made like a great psychologist or psychiatrist, because what is an interviewer really but someone who listens, And I had been listening to people, talk about themselves for decades, It's funny. Going back to high school, I was like the most unpopular person in high school. I mean, I had like one friend. Yeah, I didn't go to any proms. I couldn't pay a girl to go out with me. I mean, forget it. But somehow, I don't know how it happened. I would be sitting out on lunchtime, or girls would come by, or I know what it was actually. It's connected to writing. When I started writing a column for my high school newspaper, people would read that and they'd come up to me, people who had never talked to me before. But wow, man, I read your story. That's so cool. I thought, oh my God, there's something in this writing. You know what I mean? And I remember girls would occasionally come by and go, oh, I remember, seeing you and you read a story and that's so cool. And somehow we'd get on a conversation about something, and they talk about their social life or their boyfriend, I wasn't going to go out with them. And I don't know what I said to them, but they were comfortable talking to me. So I do believe that Edward did feel that I was never a threat to him. He knew that I would never hurt him in any way. And I don't mean physically, because he would have kicked the shit out of me. I mean, I wouldn't have fucked with his head or written anything that would have hurt him or lied to him, And I do believe he sensed that, And yes, I believe that coming over to my pad, or I would come over there, we hang out, was an escape for him, And just because he was arguably the most talented guitar player in the world and had all the money and the house and a beautiful wife who loved him and a successful band and toured around the world, that doesn't feed every part of your soul. I know that's hard to believe for any musicians who might be listening. And yeah, man, if I could put an album out, that's all I would need to do. Well, trust me, that's not it, So when people read the book and they have that same reaction to the book as you had, Peter, that maybe I was like this outlet for him. To me, that's wonderful, because that's what I wanted to try to convey. Our relationship was based on in the book. So thank you.
Look, I always said, when it comes to being popular and this and that, the reason I became a drummer, and I was basically the same thing. A tall, skinny kid, glasses, big nose, and then I started playing music, and all of a sudden you become a little more popular and you're out and about. And then I got to the point, it's like, so long as there's sex and drugs, it's like, I don't even care about the rock and roll, but you need you just, that's what brought on the whole, the cycle, the whole cycle.
Exactly. And somebody asked me the other day, well, why do you think that all these artists, all these drummers, guitar players, why do you think they ever picked up instruments, And you'd like to think, well, because it was the artist inside of them. There was this creative thing that came out. And certainly that's there, that ultimately comes out. But I will bet you 95% of them was because if I get in a band, and I don't mean this in any glib way, I'm going to be more popular. I'm going to meet more women. People are going to recognize me. And there's nothing wrong with that, I think if that's what ignites the flame, ultimately you got to you have to say something artistically, and ultimately you grow into this artist that is hopefully inside of you. But, it's funny.
For the record, I've always loved drums, but I just always love using that Spinal Tap quote. You know, as long as there's sex and drugs, who needs the rock and roll? It's like,
Yeah.
but again, I got a lot more listening to the audio tape. When you're reading the book, it can't be word for word from the audio tape, is it?
Well, interesting point. So the book comes out, and I think the first 2 editions of the book come out. I did not want to put an audio book out, and I'll tell you why. Because I felt that there's several reasons. One, looking for a narrator. I thought, well, I've got to find a narrator. And I'd heard professionally narrated audiobooks. You can go on Amazon and you can click on those audiobooks, music books, and you can hear the narrator talking. Excuse me. And they always struck me as robotic. I mean, they were, their intonation was perfect, but there was no emotion. There was no up and down in the voice. There was no sadness, no joy. So I thought, well, how am I going to find a narrator? And I thought, well, maybe I could narrate. And I tried to do that early on, and I found someone who lived near me, and I'd go over to his studio, and it was fucking hard. I mean, I would stumble over words constantly. I mean, there's a thing about writing, when you use the same word over and over, it starts to look funny to you, and it looks like it's spelled incorrectly. And I bet you there's an actual term for it. Well, the same thing happens when you say a word over and over. Guitar, and I come to the word guitar, and I couldn't pronounce the word. Anyway, at the point when I decided to narrate it, I was going to narrate the entire book, which meant that I was going to narrate word for word all of those interviews in there between Edward and me. So all of Edward's comments, I was going to narrate. And I started doing that, and I thought, this is horrible. This is not good. So I thought, how do I do this? And I had the thought, well, what if and this is all an answer to your question, Peter, what if I just use Edward's actual audio? And I did that. So I embedded all of the archival interviews I recorded with Edward, dating back to 1978, and we found the places to put them in the book. And my good friend Adam Roach, my Australian buddy, did all of that, and that was a shitload of work. So there's my narration, and then there's Edward's the interview. So now it's got my question and my voice, and then there's Edward. So he had to embed these pieces, and it was cutting and splicing. But in answer to your question, yes, it is word for word. So every word in the book, yes, is narrated by me, but all of Edward's words are in his voice. So
right. But I mean, because this is beautiful. This is if you're a book reader or avid collector, this is a book to have. But that audio tape to me was icing on the cake, because you got not only did you play a lot of these tapes, and I know that, because I have cassettes that I need to transfer, and I know that I'm going to be screwed with the damage of 30-40 years sitting in a box. And majority of your tapes came out pretty damn good. But not only did you play those tapes, but in between you're commenting and setting the mood in between. So there's a lot, but worth every bit, because I got even more out of the whole thing with that audio version that I thought was like 40-50 hours, but you say it's not. I mean, but it's a lot. It's a lot, but a damn good a lot, but it's a lot.
That's cool, man. And the reason you in a different way, the reason you get so much out of the audiobook is because instead of just reading, my question, Edward, when did you start playing guitar? Edward Van Halen. I started playing when I was 12, and I bought a Disco Del Rey. You're now hearing Edward telling you in his voice, and that to me is remarkable. These interviews, again, going back to 78, and there's little bits in the book where you can hear him noodling, and he would come over to my house, and he would play me before the records would come out. He would play me rough tapes, then we'd go into at my house, you know, and he'd play me parts on my guitar, my electric guitar, not plugged in, and he'd be playing parts, and you're hearing that stuff, and you're hearing his voice and his emotionalism. And I have never heard another audiobook constructed that way, where there is a narrator, but all of the parts in that book, and it could be about a sports figure or an actor or a musician, is actually embedded with the actual audio of that person's voice. It's always a narrator speaking all of those parts, right? Speaking in the, the subject's voice. I've never heard another audiobook where it's actually embedded with the actual subject's voice like mine is. And yeah, it's remarkable. So, and look, I'm not trying to hawk anything here, man. I think the audiobook is $39.99, but again, I think it's well over 20 hours long. And it's like you're getting like 15 hours of this rare Van Halen archive, which to me is worth the price of admission. I mean, hearing Edward, there's one little bit where he's just bought 2 Les Pauls. He brings them over to my house and he plugs one into my Marshall stack, and you can hear him ripping for 15 seconds on a Les Paul, which he would later play and take on tour. To me, that's worth the price of the whole audiobook. That's just me. Anyway, yeah, I think it came out incredibly well. So
I think again, besides the like what kind of gear did you use, those type of interviews, the thing about what you bring to the table is the behind the scenes, the 3 a.m. binging. You know, it's like, I don't want to party alone. You know, come on over, or go. You got any more? And I believe me, been there, done that with a lot of people who are very well to do, and you find out that like these people, they don't want to. There's times when they don't want to be alone, or there's times when they got everything around them. Like I said, they married or this and that, but yet it's a different point. We're getting all messed up and just going into that deep corner, and yet wanting to be away from the people that are the average crowd. You just want to be with somebody that's like, this is between you and me. You know what I mean? This doesn't leave the house, kind of stuff.
Right. Exactly. And as you pointed out, Peter, yes, in between these comments from Edward or my own comments in the hardback and the audiobook, because those are also included, I've always been my own worst critic. But I thought as I was writing the hardback, and I don't know how it came to me, I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if someone who knows more than this Steve Rosen guy in the book could actually look down on this whole scene and really give us a bird's eye view of what's happening. And so I kind of exploded that idea into what I call the notes section. And I call them different things: quarter notes and blue notes and death notes and things, and that's this person who's looking down at Steve Rosen and Edward Van Halen and mainly commenting on this journalist, Steve Rosen, and going, Rosen, why would you ask such a fucking stupid question? Dude, what is wrong with you? Or why didn't you ask that question? Or can't you see he doesn't want to talk about that, And I think people really kind of reacted to that. I was really trying to be as honest as I could, and those really were my feelings. I thought to myself, my God, why didn't I talk to him more about his family? Or why didn't I ask him more about Eric Clapton or his favorite guitar players, But as you mentioned earlier about not taking the picture with Edward, this, it's 86, 87, 88. I'm going to be friends with him for the next, until I can't walk anymore. I'm going to have time to sit down and talk with him about that. We're going to have hours and hours.
Right.
Oh man, and it's those little moments really that I look in the book and I think, oh God, you should have done it. Why didn't you do it? And again, hindsight, but yeah, so yes, I those moments are in the book, and yes, I tried to describe the mood that Edward's in, as we're talking and what we're talking about, and here's really inside of what's happening. So go ahead and listen to Edward now with that knowledge. So
You
Yeah.
got more. You've gotten more than I'd say anybody. Obviously, I mean, So, but you think, well, we'll take a picture. I've got pictures of like things that like pictures, passed out and stuff like you don't want to show. I swore I'd never show a friend, very close people that you and I know, but because I was fortunate enough to be involved and had those times. You know what I mean? So to me, it's a cherished moment because I can still see some people look at me going, hang out, man. I don't want to be here by myself, and you did because just like you just did it be out of, I don't know, obligation or, that feeling because you lived that feeling with him too, but I want to touch real quick. I've heard rumors and I heard interviews about him not digging on Michael Anthony's bass playing and you didn't like it either. And you didn't like his tone. And I don't know, man. I never saw that back in the day because I know that everybody can't be an alpha, and if he went with the flow and kept the band together and all that, it's like, so be it. But I in the interview, there was a lot of that went on. And I later saw him during the Sharon, what's his name?
Chicken fight?
I'm sorry? No, not Chicken. No, with when Gary Sharon came in, I was at those rehearsals at Warner Brothers. And I don't know. I was looking at him play. I'm going, he's a lot better than I thought. He just holds down the fort with those quarter notes. But back in the early days, I didn't know that Eddie was so distraught with that because I get it. Some people, they just want to hang out and hang out and hang out. But life changes with money and career and girlfriends and wives and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it does. And in those moments, when I was sort of voicing my opinion and Edward would be talking about it, I need to preface this whole thing that, Michael Anthony is one of the nicest people you'd ever want to meet. And when I was going to write Edward's book in 1986, he sat down with me for 2 days to do interviews for that book. I think in a partial response and an answer to your question, Peter, I grew up sort of listening to bass players sort of from the mid-late 60s. So I was used to bass players like Jack Bruce and John Entwistle, Chris Squire,
Jocko,
Andy Frazier, Jocko, Felix Pappalardi. It was just tonality-wise, they sounded completely different than the way Michael sounded. But it was just a different way of bass playing. And I never wanted to embarrass or hurt anybody. Those weren't my feelings. But Edward, I don't think Edward was ever kind of 100% happy with Mike for a long time. That being said, there's also moments in the book when Edward says, I love Mike and I love Dave, because he had some not so nice feelings about David Lee Roth as well as a singer, and he recognized the importance of Michael in the band. And he knew that the idea of replacing Michael, and we're talking earlier now, with another bass player, would have been disastrous. I mean, one, I doubt if the label would have allowed it. And two, it could have, that was a chemistry, right? And you don't fuck with chemistry. But Edward was hearing something different in his head, but he understood the chemistry. And yes, he got a little, perturbed with Michael at points in time. And yes, Michael was married and things changed. I think that he just wanted to feel more that Mike was giving more.
I get it.
And I don't think that's a wrong thing to ask. Look, no one was going to give as much to the band as Edward did, because he was Edward Van Halen 24 hours a day,
Right.
But he wanted Mike to, come over and hang out, and I'll show you some bass stuff, Mike. And Mike, I'm going to make you a bass rib of the songs without bass parts for you to practice on, And so I think it was more that. I think had Edward gotten that from Mike, I don't think the actual sound or what Mike was playing would have been an issue at all. Those are my thoughts. And again, I don't want to anybody think, oh, Rosen, what do you
No.
know about bass playing? You know, look, Michael Anthony has had an extraordinary career that I would give an arm for. So
And yeah, it's still going. But
yeah.
but at the thing, and like, you know, I'm thinking, okay, you got Ted Templeman or whatever producing a record. You're telling me that these guys are not going to find the right sound for him to sound on the record?
That's
You know?
That's an excellent point. Ted Templeman was there mainly for David Lee Roth. Ted was Dave's guy. Ted spent more time on Dave's vocals than anything. I don't think Ted did anything with Edward's guitars. That really was done with Don Landy, who was the engineer. Who Edward and Don were very close. So that's
Wouldn't Don jump in on the? I mean, he's the engineer. I mean, I know how important engineers are, you know. But I mean, don't you think he would dial him in?
I think Don Landy would, yes, spend a lot of time on that. But I don't think. But you mentioned Ted. I don't think Ted.
Yeah. Oh, he was the producer.
Now,
I mean,
right. But the bass sound, yeah, you would have, yes. Look, in my head, that bass sound on those first couple records, it's a little thin. It just doesn't fill up the track. That's me. Other people might love that sound, you know. And I think that's what Edward was hearing. You know, and he talks about it, you know. When they played live, he never had Mike in his monitors. It was just Alex. So
yeah, I can see, because you got to have a choice of, you know, you don't want to fill there's too much stuff going on. But again, the only time I heard it was with Sammy bringing that point out that Edward said that, and Sammy's going, what are you talking about? Friggin' Mikey's awesome, which he is. I mean, he's, or either that or he's come a long way. But I always, you know, quarter notes to me as a drummer, locking in with the bass player, it's either hit or miss. Sometimes you got somebody you can work with that it's like, it's adequate, or sometimes when you got a guy that like you're locking in with. But Mikey had a good quarter note. I mean, I always used to say with the guys who wanted to play, you know, all the lead bass playing kind of stuff, I'm going, there's a talent to playing quarter notes and to really digging deep into that groove. And I thought he got really good at that, because, you know, whether they were fast or slow, he held down the fort with the, you know, and that band needed that, and it all worked. I always admired that it said, and I saw that in the book too, all songs written by Van Halen. I think good or bad, that helps keep a band together, because there's something that everybody brings to the table. Yeah, you're never going to have equal contribution, and I don't know. I mean, very few bands stay together that they got only one writer. They go through people. I mean, but so that was a controversial discussion you had with Eddie too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, in terms of Mike playing quarter notes and grooving like that, I think Mike's timing was really good. And I think Edward's complaint mainly was the sound of Mike's bass, and it definitely got better. It definitely
and hanging out. You know, Alex. Because Alex and them, you know, they were brothers. They were always, you know, they're used to being around and doing stuff. So, you know, bands are hard. Let's face it. You know, band. It's like being married to 4 or 5 people. It's tough.
It's very hard.
And I've seen more Van Halen concerts. Van Halen and Rush is probably the 2 most concerts I've seen consecutively of any concerts I've ever been to in my life, because Dave was Dave, but boy, could he command a crowd. You know, he may have been a pain in the ass, and I'm looking at a lot of the videos now, because to me, sometimes it doesn't hold up. Like Dave doesn't hold up to me anymore. But I've stood in the New Orleans Superdome twice on 2 different Day of Rock and Rolls with Van Halen being there. And this was the days where you didn't have cameras to light up. You had big lighters. And I watched that guy not even sing the words and be able to look around that whole 100,000, populated room of big lighters lighting up the place. He just had that knack, even when he sucked. And I've seen them at their best and at their worst, but people ate it up. They were badass.
Yeah, no, I have no argument with that, you know, at all.
So, but the thing is, the on the road Edward, and then he come home. I mean, 2 different, you know, you'd lose track of him because he's getting pulled in different directions. And then sometimes he'd come home and want that solitude and would go and hang out with you in the early days.
That's exactly right. So yeah, he would. Yeah. So I mean, how long were those tours? 8 months. Those were monster tours, and they went on their first tour for the second record. So he'd be gone for months at a time, many months at a time. Occasionally he would call from the road. And again, that was always in the early morning hours and just wanted to talk or bullshit. Yeah, and when he came back, sometimes he'd come back, he'd be home for a few days and he'd give me a shout. Sometimes it'd be, he'd want to decompress for a little bit. But we always reconnected. And yeah, I mean, what was really amazing is I can tell you that it was those first 2 tours and those first 2 records when he was happiest. He was a kid who was, goes from playing 200-seat Whiskey A Go-Go to opening for, Montrose and Journey. And then a year later, they're headlining tours. The records start selling. So for him, it's like, fantasy land. And you could feel it. He was just overjoyed. Everything was new, and he was just, so positive about everything. And it's just amazing.
And that was old school rock and roll when rock and roll was thriving. I mean, the concerts and they were affordable. Most people went out on concert, tour hoping to break even to sell records. Nowadays, there's no records to sell. So tickets are $9,000 a piece. And, God bless the people that are paying for them. I want to just show a picture real quick because I haven't done any of that. But here's a picture of you and Edward. What year was this? Do you remember?
Yes, that's 78. So that's about a year after I first met him at the Whiskey. And that's Day on the Green. That was the first show, one-off show that they did away from the Montrose Journey tour. They were invited to play Day on the Green. Excuse me. Which was a series of concerts put on by a promoter, Bill Graham, and he bring together, 4 or 5 cool bands, like-minded, stylistically minded bands. So AC/DC opened, Van Halen were on second, Pat Travers, Aerosmith, and Mick Jones. I'm sorry, Foreigner. I was there to interview Mick Jones for guitar player, but I knew that Van Halen was going to be there. And so I hung out a little bit backstage with Edward. This shot was taken by Niels Lozauer, who's the same person who shot the covers of all 3 of my Tonechaser books. And that was pretty amazing. I mean, you have to understand, so this is 78. Edward he's 23 years old. He's gone through playing these shows, opening for Ronnie Montrose and Journey. And here he's playing on a show with AC/DC and Aerosmith. I remember later asking him, "Were you nervous?" He goes, "Yeah, man, I was a little nervous." Well, you would have never known. It was just like some kid going on to do a cover, go play a cover band at a bar with 50 people. He was never nervous. He never showed nerves. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Wow,
pretty amazing.
Again, as things change, I know that he got married and, having a baby and all these things change that start changing your time that you have to give to do things. And it started changing in your life too, with your relationship with him, unknowingly again, but over the course of a lot of years, people, people tugging at him. The time changes. I mean, sometimes it's not really intentional. Most of the time it's not really intentional. It's just the way it is. And with him, it was very nonchalant, but it kind of threw you for a loop a little bit, because there was a lot of, mood switches and changes, correct?
Absolutely correct. So I mentioned earlier, there was those first 2 years when he seemed to be happiest. I mean, look, he was on a rocket ship for, I would say, from the moment I met him in 77 until about 89 or 90. In early 90s, and I don't want to give away the book only because it's so much better if you read it in the book, but I'll try to talk about it in sort of overarching terms. He started changing in 90. He was not this person that I knew from years earlier. And you mentioned some reasons why. I believe that the marriage was having some problems at that point. and I should go back and say I saw the two of them together, Valerie Bertinelli and Edward. When I was at 5150, it was actually Valerie's house. She bought the house, and then Edward moved into the house from where he was living in Pasadena in his parents' house. So it was her house. But I was up there, a fair amount, and a lot of times she would be there. And she was the sweetest, kindest person. And I saw, the feelings between these two people. And it truly was deep love and affection and respect and everything else, man. It was there. It was palpable. So this relationship was amazing. But over the years, marriages change. Maybe they were going through some times in the early 90s. Right around then, they got a new manager, this guy, Ray Daniels, who destroyed the band. By all accounts, he ruined the band. The manager they had, Ed Leffler, passed away. Ed was like the glue for that band. He passed away. So coincidentally, Ed Leffler passes away and Edward starts to change. I don't know. I don't think so. So they lose their manager. I think the label was having some issues. I think the drug thing, Edward was changing. He was changing, and not in a good way, at least in terms of the relationship we had. And he continued to change. And, I would see him kind of less and less. And, you say that it sort of happened. It just sort of happened, it's like the drops of water in a cup, and all of a sudden the cup overflows. And I believe that's what happened, just as a function of, yes, becoming this absolute legend in his own time, and everybody wanting something with him and selling these records and doing massive tours and having all this pressure on him to write the music. And I understood that part. I really did, But some of it, later on, I think it got personal, and he said some things and treated me in a way that I thought I didn't deserve. I don't think I had done anything to have deserved that kind of treatment, and it was pretty horrible, and it was pretty painful. And after we stopped kind of hanging out in 2003, it took me a long time to get over that. Look, I'm not going to say I was devastated, sitting in a corner crying my eyes out, but it fucking hurt,
Yeah.
Look, anybody can be friends with anybody else, and you can stop that friendship at any time. But to kind of do so the way he did, and to say those things that were kind of meant to be hurtful, that I couldn't understand. And maybe, it took me 17 years to figure that out, and that's when I sat down to write this book, and maybe I was trying to find the reasons why, and maybe I thought listening to these tapes or, going back through my memories, maybe I could find some answers. I don't know if I did, maybe I opened some of those doors a little bit, but to this day, I'm still not really sure why it happened. But it did. And, I write about it in the book, and you should go read about it there.
When well, I don't think that anything I'm asking you is I don't think you're really giving away the book, giving away what's in the book, because it's so deep. I mean, it's deep and very thorough. And again, if anybody's a fan or likes to read and this and that, I highly recommend, because it's hard for me to stay focused on reading, but even the audio tape got me that much deeper to where I'm going, okay, I'm going to listen to it every time I walk, because when I was listening to Edward, even the short amounts of time I had around him, it was just like being there, if that makes any sense. Because, you're listening to what you've heard in a different fashion, but it's basically the same thing. It was him. I mean, it was just him being him. When he got clean, when he quit doing drugs and all that, do you really believe that he quit doing drugs?
Well, I mean, that's a great question, Peter. I think he actually tried to get sober 2 or 3 times while I knew him. I think the first time was around 1995. I mean, it was pretty late. And I remember him telling me that he was terrified of going on stage because he had never, ever gone on stage not having drunk. I don't say he was drunk every time, but he had beers, buzzed every single time he went on stage. I don't think, I mean, he didn't really get cleaned until after our friendship was over. I mean, I don't know when that was, early 2000s or something, you know. And he kicked the drugs and he kicked the alcohol. He could never stop the cigarette smoking. He was able to go to vaping, which is arguably worse for you than anything. I mean, back in the day when he said, yeah, man, I went to rehab, you know, I'm not going to drink or smoke or do drugs anymore. I kind of took it with a grain of salt. He ultimately would always go back. I don't think he ever lied about it. If he said he was, you know, sober, I believe he was. So I don't think he was the kind of person to lie about it. I think he was pretty open about it. But it took him a long time. You have to understand, you know, I guess growing up in European families, you know, you start drinking, you know, you have wine for breakfast, right? And the father smoked, you know, so you're around that. You know, Edward said he started smoking when he was 13 or 14. You know, and they were drunk. He and Alex were drunk, you know.
It was kind of the norm.
Yeah. So, you know.
I was just wondering if he had switched from, you know, like a lot of people went to pills and
oh, yeah. No. No, it's a good question. No. No, I don't think he ever did that.
Because
you know,
just based on my experiences with the people I know that were, you know, employed by him and have quit, because he got nasty at times, really, like would cut your, you know, with his tongue, you know, and they said, you know, especially somebody I told you how I got in with that camp, because somebody I was close to, you know, but he said he when he quit, he says, I quit. He says he's not going to insult my family like that. So he must have said some stuff that was like pretty deep and brutal, you know, which again, life's changing. If you're having, it's hard to be married to anybody in entertainment, let alone two people who are in entertainment, you know, leading their lives. And it's complicated and it gets deep. And all those nights of him being out there, you know, working. And again, you get tore up and you start lashing out when things start going wrong and taking it out on the wrong people, I guess.
No, I you know, I suppose I understand in my brain, you know, my heart, you know, tries to understand those things. And yes, you know, Valerie and Edward had, again, that amazing marriage for many, many years, but you have two high-profile people like that, you know, always in the limelight. Yeah, it had to be extraordinarily difficult. I get that, you know, or he goes on the road and he comes back and, you know, he had a bad tour or something. And yeah, you know, as you said, he lashes out. You know, we hurt the ones we love. I don't know. You know,
exactly.
Lashed out at the wrong people. You know, did he talk to his brother like that? I doubt it. I mean, look, they fought. I mean, they had physical fights. They never hurt each other, but you know, they were brothers, you know. But I mean, that love was a deep, deep love. That respect went deeper than anything. So did Edward ever say, Alex, you're fucking up. You're gonna, if you don't, you know. I seriously doubt it, and I seriously doubt if Alex ever spoke to Edward that way.
Yeah, they can work with his family.
Yeah.
Let me show another picture real quick because I have a couple that time is blowing by, and here's tell everybody who everybody is.
This is a very, very unique picture. So that's me on the far left there with my red and white scarf, looking very chic. That's Edward there. Edward could wear anything and look incredible. You know, he wasn't tall. I mean, he's like a little taller than me. I mean, I'm like, I don't know, if the wind is blowing and I'm standing on a hill, I'm like 5'7" maybe. So Edward's like maybe 5'8", but he just had that great physique. You know, man, he wore a t-shirt, oversized pants. Anyway, Edward always looked incredible. That is Don Landy. I will task anyone to find me another picture of Don Landy out there on the net. Maybe one from way back in the days. That's Don Landy, and that is the famous Les Paul. So this is the Rock Walk induction. Rock Walk is in the famous Guitar Center Hollywood store where you get all of the musicians to put their handprints in cement. Well, that's the inaugural induction ceremony. Edward was being inducted, Les Paul, I think Martin, one of the Martins from Martin Guitars, one of the Ludwigs from Ludwig Drums was being inducted. And I was able, because I knew Les Paul, I didn't know him. I'd written a book on Jeff Beck. I had reached out to Les Paul to write an intro because Les Paul was Jeff Beck's favorite guitar player. So I had spoken to Les several times. I approached Les. I go, Les, Edward Van Halen is here. Would you like to sit down and talk with him? He goes, yeah, you know, if he wants to talk to me. I asked Edward the same question. Edward, Les Paul is here, would like to talk to him. He goes, yes, if Les would like to talk to me. I was able to get all of them, both of them, to come upstairs into one of the conference rooms at the Guitar Center. I sat them both down and I was able to interview them. And after about 5 minutes, Edward said, hey, you know, we don't need you asking questions. And Edward took over the interview. So he was like interviewing Les Paul. And that moment is in the book. That moment is pretty fucking spectacular, let me tell you. So that's a pretty famous picture. Les is obviously gone now, and Don is sort of, you know, kind of just, you know, been a recluse for a while. But that was a pretty remarkable
And
picture.
that interview is also in the audio book, complete.
It is.
Correct?
It
And
is.
it's great.
Oh my God, that to me is, look, man, that is history.
Oh, it's great.
Right,
It's
right.
fucking great.
Later, Edward would become friends with Les,
Yeah.
and he would actually play in a special, like a tribute show with Les Paul.
Yeah.
Real quick sidebar here. So that was the first time Edward met Les Paul. I introduced Edward to Les Paul. The next day, this is when I was working on the original authorized biography. I said, Edward, you know, hey man, listen, when you're going to go out and like do something, you know, could you maybe just give me a little heads up so I could try and be there and record it, you know, for the book, you know? He goes, yeah, well, yeah, I'll try, you know. And I go like last night, you know, you know, at the Guitar Center. He goes, well, I didn't know till the last minute I was going to be there. I go, oh, I can understand, you know. I go, you know, I was there, you know, but you know, it would have just been great, you know, if you know, if you had let me know. And he goes, oh, you were there?
Wow.
And I go, yeah. I go, Edward, I introduced you to Les Paul. He goes, oh, really? And he never said those things to be mean. He just never remembered. The same thing happened. I introduced him to Billy Gibbons, and I introduced him to Richie Blackmore, and I write about all these moments.
Yeah.
Again, with Les Paul, I don't know. I would have thought somewhere, because there's interviews with him talking about Les Paul, he might have mentioned, oh, yeah, and I met him the first night because Steve Rosen introduced me. It never happened. You know, when he would later talk about Richie Blackmore, my name never came up. And he and Billy Gibbons became good friends. My name never came up. He totally forgot about those moments. And I came to accept it because it wasn't intentional to hurt me. I think it's because maybe his brain was so filled up with what the next guitar lick was going to be, he didn't remember. But it was a little strange, really, to be honest.
There was a lot of those moments
Yeah.
recall, you know, and so it is kind of strange. But you know, you get some people that you just don't know what's going on in somebody's head. I don't. Maybe they need to make space for other stuff, you know, and you know, that's why I said about everybody having their part. You know, I used to play with some musicians who were amazing musicians, but if it wasn't for somebody else to lead them around and get them to where they needed to be, like they had to give up that part of their brain to be that amazing musician. I don't know, but God, time is flying, and I got to keep moving here. I want to bring this up because I have not personally seen. I've talked to him, but here's a picture of you and Steve Lukather. I haven't seen Steve since he was on my show in 2017. We just dance in different circles, you know what I mean? I haven't had the time. But where did you see him when you got him to take that picture?
That was at a Leslie West tribute show. He was a huge Leslie West fan. So was Edward. But I've known Steve since the first Toto record. Which is like 78, the first great record. I was writing for a Japanese magazine called Player, and Toto were gods in Japan,
Yeah.
much bigger than they were here, right?
Still are.
So Steve, again, lived literally right around the corner from me. So I interviewed Steve many, many times over the years. He's always been the greatest, the coolest, always supportive of anything I needed. Steve, man, plus he was very, very close with Edward. They were good friends. That's a different relationship, right? You have two
musicians,
very successful guitar players, two very talented guitar players. So that relationship is balanced on a different plane than my relationship with Edward. But Edward loves Steve, and I write about that in the book.
Let me tell you, there's nobody who can tell a story like Steve Lukather.
Yeah,
he's just got that talent of the way he phrases things, the look that he gives. I mean, I am so blessed to have had the times, some I can't talk about, that I've had. And he narrated his own book too. And the Gospel according to Luke, and he throws in that Steve Lukather. You get that whole inflection and all that. So it's great stuff. But I just wanted to put that because you've seen him. I mean, I haven't. Like, he gets a phone call on his birthday and stuff like that, or a text or a video message or something. But we just, again, he's a road dog. This man never gets off the road. Just enough time to hug his kids, and boom, if he's not playing with Ringo, he's off with Toto again. And again, I was fortunate to have those chosen years around them. Working with them, but one more picture here. This is explain.
Yep. So that's at a gig in. I flew back east, Chicago. I think it was Chicago. Obviously, that's Edward on the left there. That's me in the middle, and Sammy Hagar there. And that's at the gig. I interviewed both those guys, and that was a cover story in Guitar World. That's 86. So 86. That's their first tour with Sammy. And I'd actually met Sammy before, way before he was in Van Halen. I think I met Sammy in 75 or 76. And Sammy's always been cool, very honest guy, upfront guy. But that was pretty good. That picture, again, that was taken by a famous photographer, Ross Marino. Ross sadly passed away. He was very young, many, many years ago, but great picture from Ross.
Going back to 5150, there's a part in your book where Edward gets somebody handling his, like, managing the studio. Matty, I think from what I gather, I'm pretty sure it was Matty Spindle.
Matt Brock.
Matt Brock.
Oh, you're thinking of Ken Dean?
No, Matty. I could have sworn that there was somebody that started interfering with the phone calls, that started picking up the phone calls, that and you said Matt, and I could have sworn that I was briefly introduced with somebody who used to work in a studio in Canoga Park, and I thought he went to 5150 years later, and everybody loved him. Like, all my friends that knew him closer, like, he worked with Rick Springfield's camp a lot and things like that, but then he moved over to 5150, and I thought that was Matt. I thought his name was Matty Spindle, who passed away a few years ago. I guess I'm wrong.
Yeah, that's not that guy.
Okay, because you didn't take kindly to, like, being gate kept at a certain point, where all of a sudden things were changing. It's like, who is this? I'll have him call you, as opposed to direct, and that's how times were really changing.
Exactly. That's when I knew that there was something wrong, because whenever I wanted to interview Edward, do you have time here, Peter?
I do.
Whenever I wanted to interview Edward, I would just call him. I had his phone number. I thought, hey man, we need to do a story for a German magazine, whatever it was. And he would jokingly say, "Oh yeah, call my manager," because typically you would never call the artist, you call the manager. And so I call him up this one time and say, "Hey man, Guitar World or whoever it was needs a story, and he says, call my manager." And I start laughing. Usually he'll laugh along with me, and I go, "Yeah, right, Edward. Seriously, He goes, "No, you really got to call my manager." And I think he's still kidding. And I write about this, and I go, "Excuse me?" He goes, "Yeah, man. We can't be friends anymore. I can only hang out with you. If you're gonna do a story with me, and
That's a kick in the nuts right there. I mean, that's like,
that I didn't understand. So yeah, it was around that time when he was working with this guitar tech. Yeah, it was not good.
Speaking of, I got to jump here because I'm down to my last 10 minutes. Guitars. You've talked about him using, the Frankensteins and the Kramers, and you hated Kramers and this and that. Am I correct? Did you never mention about the transition over to Peavey?
No, I probably didn't. I think that was after we after 2003.
No, because during the Sharon days.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I just never. By then, the relationship was a little weird, and
Okay.
I probably No, you're right. I never did. Honestly, just as a final comment.
Yeah.
Here, there were so many other books out there that were going to cover all that stuff.
Right.
And look, I'm not that kind of a guitar nerd guy. I mean, I can't tell you what kind of,
Right.
wire is on a PAF 58 humbucker, whereas other books, we're going to cover every single guitar disc. But no, you're right. I never did cover any of that PV
It's
stuff.
struck me funny because we talked about all the other ones and you didn't like, and I was just wondering, well, he switched over to Peavey, and they were, I guess he took they took good care of him because he used them all the way out, and my friend who was offstage keyboards at the time with the Sharon tour, JJ, it was his son's birthday, and Eddie, he said Eddie got him a guitar, signed it, sent it back to Peavey, then they clear coated over it, and then brought it back to LA, and then he gave it to my friend, which he gave it to his son, who has a collector guitar with his name signed on it. Happy birthday from Sean from Eddie Van Halen.
That's difficult. I think the reason I would bring up guitars like the Frankenstrat, which I played, and the Bumblebee guitar, which he brought over to the house, I played, and the Les Pauls, the Kramer, because that was kind of part of our story. I was sort of involved in those kinds of things. I was there the night when, he had to come up with a saying for the Kramer ad, and all that kind of. I really had nothing to do with the PVs at that point.
No, I just figured that it had to be towards the end of the Sammy days, and then on to the future. And I just was, I don't know. I kind of, because to me, again, when I had met him, he was totally, 100% using the PV stuff, and that was it. In fact, I'll show you real quick. I told you I only have one picture of that, and I took this picture, and this is before Photoshop, but this is my handwriting right there. There's no Photoshop. There's no filling it in, because all I wanted him is for it to say that Edward Van Halen was, Peter G Fan Club member number 0001. And this is before I even had a show. This was when I was a musician, but I just thought it was a good, funny joke. I wish I was in the picture with him holding it. But again, one of those hindsight's 2020. We'll just take it another time. And that was at rehearsal over there at Warner Brothers.
Cool.
In a soundstage, yeah. But life again. If we had could see into the future, well, then I guess we'd do things maybe a little differently. If you could sum up this that whole experience. I know you're glad. If you could take that whole experience and sum it up into a paragraph, what would you say?
I was probably the luckiest person on the planet to have been there that night at the same night he was there at the Whiskey. Every time I was around him, I wanted to be around him more. He was like this amazing. He had this amazing. Don't want to say aura. He was always so positive when I was around him, And look, and there were moments I'd be going through shit, and he could have said, "Hey, man, I've got enough going." He never said that. He was always supportive and respectful. There's that respect word again. I wouldn't have traded it for anything. I wish it hadn't ended the way it did. I wish I could have reached out to him one more time before he passed, and I did try, and I write about it in the book. I tried. I don't know, several times, at least 2 or 3 times. I called him, I emailed, and I never heard a word back. So that's a
Again.
that's a regret. But I was lucky to have been there. He changed the world. You know?
Yeah. Life's full of, again, nobody's perfect by no means, and life's full of regrets and woulda, coulda, shoulda. But I just say, you know, thankful for every day. I mean, there could always be worse, but you were there, you lived it. I want to tell everybody how they can get this book that I recommend. If you're a collector, if you want to have something, you know, beautiful on your bookshelf, on your coffee table, you can go. You have your own website, don't you?
I do. That is my website. You can also find the book on Amazon, eBay, and Reverb. The book actually just went up on Sweetwater, and I will happily sign those books for you. And if you want it personalized, just let me know when you make your little note, like it personalized. I'll do that for you.
And I highly recommend, if you are interested in the book, but the book is amazing, but the audio version just gives you a different perspective. And I'm a very audible kind of guy. I'm very kinetic, and I like visual, and I like, audible. Some people are bookworms. They could get into a book and throw themselves into the book. I need more. And that audio version gave me everything I think that I could get, to extend the life of what came out of the book.
Cool. And I'm sorry, Peter, I also wanted to mention, you can also get the audiobooks on tonechaserbook.com.
There you go. Well, I highly recommend it, again, because those tapes of the actual, audio from those tapes from the 80s and the late 70s and all that, amazing. And I think it was really, you did good. You did really good on incorporating it and how you mixed it in between with the comments and all that. Just good stuff. And plus you can listen to the audiobooks while you're driving on the road, or just like the way they take the Peter G show. I mean, take it on the road. It's the next best thing to being there, because you can't drive and read a book at the same time for those who are on the go. But amazing stuff. Unfortunately, again, I'm almost burned out of time. Perhaps we can do this again sometime, because you have more than just the Eddie Van Halen stuff. I mean, you've talked to so many musicians. I don't do a whole lot of music stuff, but I don't know why. I guess maybe because I've been in it and I just think it's not a big deal. But I do realize a lot of people are going to get a lot of mileage out of this bit of time that you've given me here for the Peter G show. So I thank you for sticking with me through our little turbulence that we had of getting you on here. But as I said, I think 3 times is a charm.
Cool, man. Yeah, it was great. Yeah, man. I have a million other great stories I could tell you. So, All
right. I'll hang out. If you don't mind, just hang out for a couple of minutes, because I want to talk to you once we're over. So just stay in the green room, and that way I don't have to bother you tomorrow. But again, I want to thank you. And all those out there want to get Steve Rosen's book, right there, go to www.tonechaserbook.com, and he's got everything you want right there, and it's on Amazon and all the above. But right here in front of you, a true rock historian, especially if you're a guitarist, Mr. Steve Rosen, in the flesh, and you've lived it, and you live to tell about it. So thanks for sharing with us and on the show. This show will live on forever, and I hope do even more good as it snowballs into a big giant machine of information, of things that maybe people never heard of and need to know. So thank you.
Very cool, Peter. Thank you for having me.
All right, man. Wave to everybody. Say bye, and I'll talk to you in a few minutes.
See you, everybody.
There you go. Peace out. Right there, Steve Rosen. Okay, let's go here. Where we're going? Huh? What'd I tell you? Awesome. I knew it would be, but God bless it, was it tough getting through some of these hurdles? But that's life. Bunch of hurdles, and all I can tell you is it's not what happens to you, it's how you deal with what happens to you. So there, last look, how to get the book, how to get the audio tapes, how to get more information on Steve Rosen. Again, rock journalist icon. I dare say, I don't know too many that have done too much more than what he's done in that world of guitar heroes and things like that. So we'll have him on in the future. I'm going to talk to him about that. But again, everything happens for a reason. So I was very blessed that he gave us the time to be on the show. I want to thank everybody for being on Life of Peter G, the Peter G Show, every Wednesday like clockwork, 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. on the East Coast. Next week, it's going to be us. I want us to take a little bit. There's been a lot of crap going on, and the technical difficulties and that. I want to just us converse about whatever's on your mind, whatever's on my mind, and we're going to take it from there. But I you know how much I love doing that, because I love we the people talking about stuff, whatever is kind of irking you, your comments, all the above. I think it's good stuff, and sometimes it's good to do that, and I like doing that. Hence the word talk show. But that's what we're going to do next week. So again, don't forget, please share, subscribe. It's very important. It's what helps. Pass the word along, all right? Especially certain shows you think somebody's going to appreciate, take with them, say, hey, go check this out. Check this guy out. He says it's a little weird getting used to him, but once you get used to him, you kind of love him. So that's it. Life is short. I remind you, life is tough. And please, just be kind. All right. You don't have to be an ass, but you don't have to take a lot of crap from people either, because life is what it is. But just take a breath. When something happens, ingest it. I talk about that a lot lately, about people jumping the gun too quickly. It's stressful times we're living in. But please be kind. Try to do that. Think before you speak. I've talked a lot about that lately. But again, thank you for watching. My name is Peter G. Thanks for checking out the show. Please share it with everybody, and we'll see you next week. And as always, I truly love you guys, and peace out.
Peter G Show, Peter G Show, divorce dad, single dad, divorce dad, single dad, Peter G Show.